Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After we run you through the news you need to know about, we're going to break down free agent tight ends. That's the next positional group we're doing on this week's episode. And after that, we go through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. This first this first news story, and only news story of the day, unfortunately. We have two. We'll start with this one because nobody really cares about this. It's interesting that how many former Dolphins are being hired by other organizations. It's pretty crazy. Panthers hire former Dolphins quality control coach Matt Lombardi. Matt Lombardi will be taking a promotion with the Panthers and leave the Miami Dolphins. So pretty much the same thing as Patrick Graham, which Patrick left the Dolphins to be not only the defensive coordinator of the Giants, but an assistant head coach as well. So it was a promotion. He didn't just leave to leave. And it made a little bit more sense when you hear stuff like that. So another Dolphin is going to be promoted with a different organization. Just interesting stuff. It's really interesting. I think it's very telling of how the league viewed this coaching staff and how, really the Dolphins just played better than I think a lot of, even people around the league thought they would. And I think they're getting rewarded for that. I mean, I know some of these guys have ties to other people. And the Chad O'Shea thing was just straight us being stupid. But you got our offensive line coach leaving. Matt Lombardi left. Patrick Graham's leaving. A couple other people left. Sorry, guys. Just a little, a little sniffly. But yeah, so it's really interesting how all of this stuff really shook out. And again, I think it is telling that the Dolphins did overachieve. And you see some of that with some of the hires across the league. This another news story, which is way more interesting, comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins, these are some news stories on Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen. The Dolphins enter the offseason with tons of cap room and a bevy of draft capital. Will GM Chris Grier capitalize on those picks? History suggests that he might. ESPN.com's Cameron Wolfe took a trip down memory lane recently and highlighted some of Grier's biggest hits over the past 3 years. The Dolphins are currently set to pick at number 5, 18, and 26 overall in the first round, but they're also expected to move around as they kick their rebuild into high gear. For what it's worth, Grier says the Dolphins' plan right now is for Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen to both be on the offseason roster. It remains to be seen whether Fitzpatrick 37 will return for another season, but the quarterback has confessed that retirement would be difficult for him. As it stands, Fitzpatrick is under contract for $8 million in 2020, with $4 million of that guaranteed. Pairing Fitzpatrick with a rookie quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, who will be ready to throw in April, would make a lot of sense. Meanwhile, it's hard to see Rosen fitting into the picture. So this brings up a lot of it's a good topic. And again, that news story was from Pro Football Rumors, in case I didn't mention that. But it's a good, interesting, and this is something that we've talked about in the past, but what will the Dolphins do at the quarterback position? And let's start with let's start with what I would do if I was the Dolphins. I, honest to God, if it came to it, and this whole culture rebuild and the whole culture revamp has been built upon the fact that competition is everything. Competition is everything. If you're better, you get the job. Doesn't matter if you're a first-round pick, seventh-round pick, high-price free agent, low-price, undrafted free agent. It doesn't matter. If you're better than the other person, you're going to start. That's what this whole thing has been a part. And Brian Flores has done a good job of establishing and inserting that belief into the organization. And it really shows. Now, hopefully that continues because it's easier to do that with a roster pretty much filled with nobodies. I mean, that's just a fact. It is easier to do that when you don't have a bunch of bad contracts on there, all that kind of stuff. It's easier to make those decisions. But this is a whole, the sheet is wiped clean. Hopefully they make better decisions. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a Bill Belichick type of a way that we run the team in terms of we take people, maybe somebody, hasn't done well in another place, but he fits the scheme here and he succeeds here because he fits the scheme here, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how we ran the organization from here on out, which is a smart way to do it. But back to topic. Don't want to get off, too far off topic. But they've established that. They've established the whole competition breeds excellence and stuff like that. And so in going in that vein, what I would do is keep all three of them. I would keep Ryan Fitzpatrick. We have a ton of caps. There's no reason we don't do this, by the way. I would keep Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's already under contract. He already has $4 million of his deal guaranteed to him, which is half of his contract. So I would keep him here, obviously. And he was great in 2019. He was amazing. He was underratedly good. And if he was on a better team, he would have won some type of offseason award because he played very well, probably the best football he's played of his career. His final stat line is actually pretty good considering the circumstances and especially how the season started. Obviously, things got significantly better, but he had a great year. And I think no matter what, the Dolphins should keep him because he makes this team very competitive. And if he has a better and more competitive roster around him, he definitely can lead a team to the playoffs. I think he's hit his stride this late in his career. I think he's playing the best football he's ever had. And I really like Ryan Fitzpatrick. So you match that up with the fact that Gailey's here, and he had his most wins of his career in a season with the Jets when they went 10-6. Gailey was his offensive coordinator in New York. Gailey is now here as a Dolphin. So that all of those things, I think, are positives, and I think those are some of the reasons why you would keep Ryan Fitzpatrick. Josh Rosen, I think some of the reasons why, and again, I would keep all three of them. I would keep Tua. I would draft Tua. I'd keep Josh Rosen, and I would keep Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I would let them compete in the offseason. And whatever happens, happens. If Josh Rosen doesn't show up again in his third season in the league, then he's gone. We have to figure out, we could trade him. We could do a variety of different things with Josh Rosen. Obviously, his contract is historically cheap because of, the whole trade deal and stuff like that. And then, obviously, you wouldn't get rid of Tua at any point because he's young and you have to develop him, and you invested a top 5 pick in him. But I would keep all three of these guys through the offseason just to see who comes out on top. And I think you have to have as many chances at a franchise quarterback as possible. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick's old. He's at the sunset of his, I guess, years of playing in the league because of his age. But he's still, in my opinion, playing the best football of his life. So you could have him for a year and sit one of the young guys behind him, and then next season you do the competition thing all over again. Maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick has sunsets his career, he leaves. You have Josh Rosen and Tua Tagovailoa to take this franchise into the future, and those two can battle it out to see who's the best. So I think it's a win-win situation. Both of them could still learn under Ryan Fitzpatrick if they make the roster and continue to get better. Ryan Fitzpatrick, it's a win-win scenario if the Dolphins keep all three. So if I was the Dolphins, I would keep all three of them. I would let them compete in the offseason, really see what stacks up. If Josh Rosen continues to fall short and has some of the same issues that he's had over the last 2 years, then you have to make a decision on him, I would say, before the season starts. And obviously you would just roll with Tua Tagovailoa and Ryan Fitzpatrick going into the future. But I would keep all three of them through OTAs and probably through training camp as well, just to see who is the better of the three. And if there's all three so good, you don't want to let him go. You let Ryan Fitzpatrick play out this year. If he continues to play at a high level and then he's out next year, maybe he's satisfied with the success we might have with him this season and he's gone. Again, you have those two for the foreseeable future, two young quarterbacks. All right, both of them are very talented. Josh has had a lot of issues with consistency with the organizations that he's been with, and really, especially in the NFL, he's never really gotten a shot of a team being all behind him 100%. But he's still a very talented player, a very smart player, one of the better pocket passers we've seen come out of the draft in recent years. He just needs to get better at adapting to the NFL game, and hopefully he does that, and you could have a franchise quarterback on your hands, and that's not a joke. He is that talented. Oh, sorry. Sorry. feeling a little groggy today. But he is that talented. Like I said, he has the talent to become that. Now, whether he will or not, it remains to be seen. He had some of the same issues he had in his first year in the NFL. He had some highs. He had some high highs whether that be in the preseason or the regular season. He had some moments where you're like, wow, that was a franchise quarterback type of a play. And some of the things that I think are underrated about his game before we move on to the tight ends, he's an underrated, he has underrated mobility in the pocket. He is a very good extender of the play for his play style. He's a pure pocket passer, but he has that Tom Brady, Dan Marino type of a thing that you always hear about, where he can extend plays with very subtle movements in the pocket, and he does have the athleticism to get on the edges of the pocket, break the edges of the pocket, and extend plays that way as well. And he's a very good thrower on the run when he does that. We saw that. In some moments against the Cowboys, we saw some of that. And definitely in preseason, when he was playing lesser talent, we saw a lot of that. So he has that in him. And again, we saw that in other regular season games as well. He has that in him, but he holds, and again, some of the things he needs to work on, he holds the ball way too long. Now, whether that's his issue of not being able to process what defenses are doing, or he just wants to make a play. He doesn't give up on a play. He doesn't have the athleticism like a Patrick Mahomes or a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers to do that. He can't hold the ball and make three guys miss and throw a 50-yard bomb down the field. He just doesn't have the athleticism to do that. He has the arm to do that, but he doesn't have the feet and the juice to do that. So I don't know if that's some of the things, or maybe it's his inability to read defenses quick enough. Whatever it is, he needs to learn to get rid of the ball faster. He holds on to the ball way too long. That's the only thing he does wrong in his game. And that leads to more sacks, and it makes your offensive line worse. That's when Ryan Fitzpatrick came in the game. The ball came out way quicker, and he also had the athleticism to make people miss. And that's what's missing in Josh Rosen's game. He needs to perfect his craft in being a pocket passer and getting rid of the ball quicker. And if he can do that, then he has a future in this league to be a very good quarterback. And I would, like I said, he has pinpoint accuracy when he sees it and when it's there, and he can make all the throws on the field. And he's not an inconsistent thrower of the football at all. I just feel like he needs to just get better. He just needs to get better of getting rid of the ball quicker. And that was his biggest fault during the entire season. Not to mention, he was dealing with very little on offense in terms of offensive line. For a younger quarterback who isn't adapted to the game yet, to deal with an offensive line like that is just going to spell disaster. That's why when Ryan Fitzpatrick came into the lineup, I feel like I'm repeating myself again, but like I said, he understood when to get rid of the ball immediately. I mean, there were 1,000 times where he had a free rusher, and he just knew, all right, I got to get rid of the ball here. And that's a good play. He doesn't take a 10-yard loss. It's second down. We still can get a first down. He always kept us ahead of the chains. He just made very smart decisions with the football, and he could dissect defenses a lot faster. And not to mention, he has the ability to extend plays with his legs. So that's why I feel like Ryan just was a better quarterback. And I think Josh can hopefully learn from some of those things and just speed up the clock in his mind a little bit quicker. And he can be a very good quarterback. So let's move on to the tight ends, ladies and gentlemen, where we preview free agency. Each and every single week on the show, we preview a position each week. The last 2 weeks we did quarterbacks and receivers. This week we're going to preview free agency tight ends, which is a little bit more interesting. So let's get into that right now. All right, let's get into the tight ends. So this is the first positional group that we've previewed, and I've been starting with the least exciting, the least interesting, I would say, positional groups. I started with the least interesting for obvious reasons, because you don't want to start with the best and everything else be super boring at the end. So this is the first one that I think the Dolphins should actually look into investing in some of these players, and I think they actually need to. Because of the offense. Well, now that the offense has shifted a little bit, it's a little bit more pass-heavy than it was previously. Because our previous offense was way more balanced and could adapt to any defense that it were to play that week. That's why I love that offense. It just adapts. Now, we couldn't adapt last season because of our limited personnel issues. And we didn't do that, and we were still successful with passing every single week. So I understand. There is a little bit of like, okay, this Gailey offense, we can run at a high level because we are a very good passing team. The last 2 months of the season, we were top 10 in passing offense. So, I mean, it is, I think there is a fit there with Chan's scheme in the personnel that's on this roster, which is a smart. I think they fit each other, which is a good thing. I just still think that Chad O'Shea's offense was. I'm getting off topic. Who cares about Chad O'Shea? Let's get into the tight ends. So we have to look at these free agent tight ends as a fit within the scheme, and I think the Dolphins could stand to get another threat at tight end. Run a little, and I know that he runs a spread offense, but when we do run the football, we do need more physical players up front. So I've compiled a list of the tight ends that I would look into. And again, some of these guys that I'm going to argue for, some of these guys that I'm going to argue against. Not everybody on this list is someone that I would pick. It's just I compiled a list of the best tight ends I thought in free agency. So let's start with this one, a former Dolphin. We'll start with the vets and we'll get into some of the younger players. So let's start with the veteran players. Let's start with Charles Clay. Now, Charles Clay is on a decline of his career. I feel like his peak, he's definitely hit his peak. He's now into the valley stages of his career. He had a very down season in a favorable offense for his skills in terms of he's a good receiving tight end. He's 6'3". He's only 30 years old. He just turned 30 years old. He was in a pass-happy offense. I do think more of a pro-style offense fits him. Now, the spread scheme that we're going to run with Chan Gailey, I think kind of is like, okay, does he fit that? No. I don't think he fits the scheme. Not only do I not think he fits the scheme, but I don't think he's a good enough receiving tight end anymore to line up in like the slot or something like that. Charles has never been like, he's a bigger tight end. He's 6'3". He ran a 4.6 40. He played fullback in college, and then obviously when we drafted him, he slowly converted to tight end. And I think he fits more of a pro-style, under-center, play-action type of an offense, which I don't think we're going to be doing a ton of in this offense. So I just don't think he's a fit, plus his age and his versatility, I think, is a little... It's not good enough to fit this offense. When we do go under center and do some of that stuff, I don't think we're going to have a daunting enough of a run game, and I don't think the run game is going to be a focus in this offense. As much as it would have been if Chad O'Shea stayed. So if we were running more of a pro-style offense and it was a run-first offense, then I think Charles Clay would be more of a fit, but I just don't think he fits what direction we're going in for the future. So I'm going to X out Charles Clay. I don't think he's a fit. So let's move on to some other veteran tight ends, Marcedes Lewis. Now, Marcedes Lewis is a very similar tight end to Charles Clay. He's a big tight end. He's 6'6", 276 pounds. The man is basically an offensive lineman. He also is 35 years old. He has never been known as a good receiving threat. He's always been, he was in Jacksonville for many years, blocking for Maurice Jones-Drew and those run-heavy offenses that were just physical, downhill, grinded-out type of offenses that relied on play action and stuff like that. But it was a lot of two tight end sets. We're just going to smash you in the mouth. That's where Marcedes comes from. That's what he's done best throughout his career, is just be a very, very... He's like an extra offensive lineman that can go, that can sometimes go out on a pass pattern. I apologize, guys. I mean, listen, you guys are going to have to deal with it this episode. There's snot everywhere. I apologize. But anyway, Marcedes Lewis, for the same reasons Charles Clay doesn't fit this offense, are the same reasons Marcedes Lewis doesn't fit this offense. He's not versatile enough. He's a very good run blocker. He's great in play action because he's a great pass pro type of a player where you can, the old saying is never leave a tight end one-on-one with a pass rusher. Maybe you won't leave him one-on-one with Von Miller, who's all-pro, Hall of Famer. But if you play some, maybe you're playing the Colts D-line this week and they don't have that, tremendous athletes at the defensive end position, you can leave him. He's 6'6", 200, almost 300 pounds. The dude can be left with maybe a 3-4 outside linebacker or someone like that. So you can do a lot of creative things with him in pass pro. So he does fit more of a pro-style offense. And again, he fits that Maurice Jones-Drew, old school type of smash mouth, a lot of tight ends in the game. If he was in like a Los Angeles, like a Sean McVay offense where they're under center a lot and they rely on play action, kind of like Kyle Shanahan is right now, to really further their passing offense, then he would fit that offense. I don't think we're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. I think you're going to see a lot of shotgun, spread type of stuff from Chan Gailey, and I think you're going to really see this offense utilize the weapons on the field. And I'll talk about that after the tight ends, but let's stay on the tight ends. So I'm Xing out Marcedes Lewis as well. He's 35 years old. He doesn't fit the scheme, and he would be very underutilized. It's very similar to Dwayne Allen. Like, I just, now we didn't have enough foresight to see it then. Like, oh, Dwayne Allen can't go out on a pass route anymore. He's a good run blocker. But we didn't know at that point that we just can't run the football, literally. So, I think it would have been a very similar situation to Dwayne Allen's situation where it's like, I don't know what to do with you, Marcedes. We couldn't, you're a great run blocker. You're probably the best run blocker or second best to George Kittle in the National Football League, but we don't run the football like that. So you just don't fit our scheme. So again, 35 years old, not versatile enough in my opinion. So I think we should move on from there. Let's start with the last veteran tight end on this list, Vernon Davis. Now, Vernon Davis is a smaller tight end than the last two that we talked about. He's 6'3". He's not almost 300 pounds. He's 35 years old, and he ran a 4.3 40 time. So he's a freak athlete, and still in his old age, he's a very good athlete. He's a very versatile tight end who can help you in the run game, also in the pass game. I also think for the similar reasons that we talked about with Marcedes Lewis and Charles Clay, he fits more of a pro-style offense at this point in his career. If this was young Vernon Davis could fit any offense. He could do whatever the heck you want him to do. He's a good run blocker. He's a great receiving threat down the middle of the field. He's such a great athlete that, he was really the first of these like dominant slot tight ends that we saw. Then Gronk came after him and Jimmy Graham, and that really just kind of busted everything open. I mean, obviously Tony Gonzalez came before him and stuff like that, but it was less common to see a tight end like that. After Vernon Davis, that stuff, it became more common to see bigger, more athletic tight ends in the slot. And he was one of them. I just don't think he, at this point of his career, that he can do both at a high level. I don't think he can be a dominant receiving threat, and I don't think, again, we're going to be one of those offenses that runs at you 25 times to 20 times a game. That's a run-first offense. I don't think that. So I just don't think he fits the offense in terms of scheme, and I don't think he's versatile enough anymore to be a dominant receiving threat. I think some of what the Dolphins are going to be looking for are coming up right here. So for again, versatility issues and age, I just don't think Vernon Davis fits the scheme the Dolphins are running. So we're going to X out Vernon Davis. So we're down to two. And these two are very young tight ends who have had injury issues, but are very good fits with this offense. So let's start with the one that I don't think the Dolphins should even come close to, because I think this player is going to be paid an extraordinary amount of money. Now, they could, and I think it would be an investment that they would reap the rewards of, that's for sure. But this particular player is a very high-profile player, and I think the Dolphins should still invest all that they can in the offensive and defensive lines. So, keeping that in mind, we'll get into this right now. So, the first young tight end I want to talk about is Hunter Henry. Now, Hunter Henry is a very versatile tight end. He is only, how old is Hunter Henry? I have it right here. He's 25 years old. He's 6'6", so he's a huge tight end. He's 250 pounds, 6'6", 250 pounds. Came from, I believe, Arkansas. So he came from and we've seen that in his pro career that he's a very good run blocker. So very versatile, great receiving threat, gives you a great safety blanket to throw to. He's great down the seam. He's great in the red zone. He's very good in the red zone. He's very versatile. You can put him in the slot and line him up against a safety, and he can dominate that way. Or a smaller corner, like a nickel corner, he can dominate that way. He's a mismatch for any linebacker in the National Football League. So he's a dominant receiving threat if you want to utilize him in that way. If you want to get under center a little bit, and use him like that, he can do that at a very high level as well. So he's a very versatile tight end who can do both things extraordinarily well, and he's only 25 years old. The thing is, he's the best at his position in the free agent market, and he's such a good player. He's going to command a ton of money, and he's had health issues throughout his career. He's had a lot of knee problems, and obviously he's had a few ACL tears in his career. So some of those things kind of probably shy you away from him, but he's still a very dominant type of a tight end. He's a definite. I could see him being in the top 6 or 7 tight ends in the league. He's one of the better tight ends in the league, and especially with his age at 25, his prime is still ahead of him. And again, he's a very versatile tight end, and he presents a great mismatch. You already have Mike Gesicki on the roster, and it's not like you're bringing another Mike Gesicki who isn't going to maul you in the run game. Hunter Henry can maul you in the run game. He'll hit you. So he brings that versatility. So you're not only are you getting a dominant receiving threat, but you're getting someone that you can utilize in a lot of different packages and take advantage of defenses in that way as well. So Hunter Henry is a very good player. I don't know how much money he's going to command. I have no idea. But if the Dolphins, would I target this? If I was the GM of the Dolphins, would I be actively trying to get Hunter Henry as a priority in free agency? No, I would not. He would be the last thing on my mind. But would I be upset if the Dolphins had Hunter Henry on the roster? Absolutely not. I think he's a great player, and he would make this offense even more difficult to stop, and he would help the run game a great deal. So he would help in a lot of different areas, and he would bring up the touchdowns, that's for sure. And if he can stay healthy, he's a Pro Bowler. So I would not be mad if the Dolphins signed a Pro Bowler. But again, he is so far down the list of things that the Dolphins should be worried about in free agency. Apologize for that. I can't talk and I know it's gross, but there's snot everywhere, guys. I'm not gonna say where the snot lands, but it's gonna impede my speech. I apologize for that. So the final tight end on this list, and this is the last of my list. Now you guys might have different lists, but I feel like these are the best tight ends in free agency. I wish some of those Titans tight ends were free agents, like Michael Pruitt. And the other tight end, I can't remember his name. Not Jonnu Smith. The other tight end who broke Daniel Sorensen's ankles in the AFC Championship game for a touchdown. I can't remember his name. But he's a good man, I don't know. Maybe it's Luke Stalker or something like that. He's a good player as well. And so is Michael Pruitt. But I don't think either one of those are free agents. So this is the last on my list. Tyler Eifert. Now, Tyler Eifert is 6'6", 250 pounds. He's 29 years old. He's basically another Hunter Henry. I don't think he came from Notre Dame. He's a good run blocker. I don't think he's as good of a run blocker as Hunter Henry. I don't think he's as physical as Hunter Henry, but he's still a good run blocker. He is not a bad run blocker by any stretch of the imagination. He is a good run blocker. He's not as good as Hunter Henry or maybe a Mercedes Lewis, but he still sticks his face in there and he gets the job done. So I think he's a versatile tight end. Who has the ability still, and I know he's had a down year because of all of his injuries. He had a down year this last season. He only had 400 receiving yards, which is, he had 3 touchdowns, which, if you look at his prime years in 2015, which was his best season, he had 13 touchdowns, 13 double-digit touchdowns. He didn't even play all 16 games, and he still had 615 yards. That was really where Tyler Eifert became Tyler Eifert. And we know Tyler Eifert as this, good tight end. And I still think he has that in him. So I think he could be someone the Dolphins pay nothing for because he's going to command nothing. Because if you look at his production the last 2 years, it hasn't been good. But he was in a bad situation last year. He still managed to get 400 receiving yards in a bad offense, and he still managed to catch 43 passes, and he caught 3 touchdowns, and he averaged 10 yards a catch. To me, as a player, if you look at a player that's come off 2 injury-riddled seasons and has had a lot of injury issues, and he was in a terrible roster with a terrible organization, to still produce like that, I think is good signs that he is going to produce even more for a better team and a better organization in the future. So I think those are good signs pointing in the direction that Tyler Eifert is going the right way. Now, again, the reason we're talking about tight ends is one of the least interesting is none of these guys that I would none of them would be a top priority in free agency. If you had these are the guys that we really need to try to get. He's not on that list. None of the tight ends are. But he would help the team be better. He still has a Pro Bowl talent. I really do believe that. And I think him producing at a decent level last season, coming off all of those issues and being on the worst roster in football, or not the worst roster, but the worst situation in football, I think is all signs pointing up. He in his prime, in his best years, he was one of the best red zone threats in the league. scoring double-digit touchdowns in the red zone. And he just, again, a mismatch. Like I said, you can do a lot of different things with him under center and in the shotgun. And if it pays off, it's really going to pay off. And you match him up with Mike Gesicki, I think it can be a real issue for NFL defenses. And again, he brings out versatility where you can line him up under center and do some of those things with him as well. You know, he can be great in the play-action game. And like I said, he's great in the red zone. He gives you a big, physical tight end, 250, 6'6", who's got a great hands and great catch radius. And I think he's starting to come back. And he's only 29 years old. And I think if the Dolphins did sign him, they could get him for cheap. And like I said, they could reap the rewards of his ascension. Which I think he is ascending a little bit. So in all, that's my tight end list. I think most of these guys just don't fit the offense. They aren't versatile enough to fit the offense. I think the only two guys are the younger guys. You look at Hunter Henry, who I think is going to command too much money to because if you spend all this money on Hunter Henry, that could have been 2 or 3 rotational D linemen, or maybe you add better depth to the offensive line, something like that, which is much more. We need that way more than we need a tight end. If I had it my way, we would invest everything into defensive line and offensive line. And to be honest with you, I would invest all of it into defensive line in that front seven, because that thing, it needs help bad. It's the worst unit in the league, and it needs help very, 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 very bad. So I would revamp that entire side of the football. That would be the number one priority. But we were talking about tight ends, and I feel like if you had to make a 1 and a 2, which I think there are only 2 that would be viable options, it would be Tyler Eifert and Hunter Henry. Now, Tyler Eifert would be the more preferable, because he's not going to be the number 1 tight end. You're not going to pay him like a number 1 tight end, and I think he has the ability to be still a number 1 tight end in this league. He's shown it in the past, and I think he's starting to get it back now. And if he can stay healthy, then he can be a great player. And again, he's had concussion issues, I believe, and he's had the knee issues. Which is not a good combination, but I think he's finally started to get healthy again, and he can still be something for an offense. And again, if you got Hunter Henry, who's had very similar issues to Tyler Eifert, then who's just, I think, a better player at this point in his career. We're talking about Hunter Henry right now, but he's going to command more money. So either one of them would help the offense a great deal, especially if they can stay healthy. So those would be the only 2 viable options. So that's my tight end list. Let me know what you guys think about that, and maybe who would you pick out of that list. But I think those are the best tight ends of free agency. So before we move on to the fan Q&A, I do want to talk about something that I found very interesting, that I've seen some people talk about. People bring up we went back-to-back playoff appearances with Shane and Gailey, and then I think Lamar Smith. Yeah, it was Lamar Smith, he was actually, I think, top 3 in best rushing performances in the NFL history. I think he had 209. It was versus the Colts, I believe, and we upset Peyton Manning in that game. I think that was our last home playoff game. No, was that our last home playoff game, or was it against the Ravens? Was our last? I can't remember. I think it was against the Ravens. Was our last home playoff game. That was our last playoff win. Regardless, well, if you look into that, which that was a very run first offense. That's all we did was run the football. But we played great defense. We ran the football, played great defense. Shane Gailey didn't believe in that. He was told to do that and told to run the offense that way. That was not his offense. He is a pass first type of a coach. And if you look at the Jets in 2016, it's a perfect example. Just go watch that. Look how Ryan Fitzpatrick had over 30 touchdowns. They went 10-6. They had Eric Decker, Brandon Marshall. I think they had Percy Harvin at the time too. I could be wrong about that. But that's what they did. They were a pass-first team. So when people bring up the whole Lamar Smith stuff and back in the day, that was not Shane Gailey. That came up from higher from the head coach down. That was not Shane Gailey. It's a very interesting story, and I think it was Dave Hyde and Omar Kelly who did an interesting. They had an interesting conversation about it, which I felt like was very informative in terms of what you're going to get out of Shane Gailey. It's just, and if you've chained with the Bills, all that stuff, most of you know what Shane Gailey is. But, people bring that up like, oh, he didn't run the football. No, he didn't. That came from, that came from head coach down. That was not Shane Gailey. He was, he felt, and this is from Dave Hyde and Omar Kelly, that the offense, they felt that they were handcuffed because of the instruction. They wanted just to run the football and play through Zach Taylor, a combined Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas. They wanted to play through that defense, and that's what they did. And which it was successful. I think was that a part of our 7-year playoff run? I can't remember. Maybe it was, but yeah. So there you go. It wasn't Shane Gailey. It was someone else's instructions, I guess you could say. So let's get into the fan Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we answer fans' questions, and I actually uploaded it this week, so that's great. Let's start with this first question. This first question comes from JagPack18. Let me catch my breath for a second, dude. I feel like sometimes when I go back to edit some of this stuff, it's like, dude, can you just breathe for a second, for God's sakes? So yeah, I'm trying to slow down a little bit. But anyway, whatever. But anyway, this first question comes from JagPack. JagPack asks, I know you were upset about Chad O'Shea getting fired, and so was I. But I went back and watched some highlights and have come to a conclusion that the most of the offensive success came from Fitzpatrick's ability to elude pressure, escape the pocket, and run or chucking up a 50-50 ball. I disagree with this. The Cincinnati game, I think, is a great example of, in the New England game, is a great example of a great game plan and great play design. There were a lot of plays in that game, both those games, that were just great play designs. Some of the biggest catches in that game were from Isaiah Ford over the middle. Some of the screens that we threw against the New England Patriots, and some of the trick plays as well, were just really well designed. And same thing if you watch the Cincinnati game. I know it's Cincinnati, and even the Eagles game, there were great play designs in those games. Now people, especially from like the Eagles game, and again, I think more of that was from Devontae Parker and his ability to just dominate. But there were, again, it wasn't just that. You think about some of the the plays that we threw to Patrick Laird and some of those plays as well. It was a great passing offense. It was very, and I'm not even joking, especially when Patrick came into the lineup, it was literally identical to when the Patriots only ran spread. They were, recently, when Brady's gotten older, they've become more of an I-form, like, run-first type of a team and dominate you that way, especially in the playoffs. Back in the day, it was Danny Woodhead out of the backfield. It was Wes Welker over the middle. It was Randy Moss on the outside. It was a very spread-oriented offense. They even ran out of the spread offense. That's what that offense used to be. And that's what we were running with Patrick Laird and Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. And we had Isaiah Ford, who eventually came along and was more consistent working in the middle of the field. And Albert Wilson got more healthy. And it wasn't just that. It was, schematically, it was a good offense. And you don't get top 10 you don't get in the top 10 of for 2 months if you don't have a good offense, schematically a good offense. So I disagree with that. I think there was some of that, and a lot of that came, in his ability to do that, and we haven't seen that from him on a consistent basis, was because of coaching. We understood that what his abilities were, and we took advantage of that, and that's good coaching. And like I said, we didn't see that before, and he didn't get that many opportunities to do that in past offenses. And I think Chad recognized what this offense was good at, and what this offense could do, and what this offense was capable of, and he utilized everybody's talent the best he possibly could. And he especially with the offensive line, they were better pass blocking than they were run blocking, and that showed. And his ability to do that and really form a scheme around his players and adapt that scheme to his players was very, very, very smart, and it's something that we haven't seen here in forever, really. And probably since Don Shula, that kind of creativity. And when Don, you hear about it in NFL films all the time, when he went from the 70s and even the early 80s when we got beat by the Redskins in the Super Bowl, and then obviously right after that we drafted Dan Marino, we switched to a pass-heavy offense with Mark Duper and Mark Clayton and Nat Moore and Tony Nathan coming out of the backfield. So that's, we haven't really seen change like that and adaptability like that since then with some of the offenses that we've ran since Dan Marino and Don Shula. And I'm not saying that it was on that level, but he did do that. He did adapt his offense to his players. And Brian Flores, credit to him, he was with it. And that's what New England has done over the last 20 years, is adapt. And I think we did a good job of that. We understood what our players did well instead of banging our head against the wall and trying to continue to run the football because it wasn't working. And then about mid-season, we were like, all right, we have to redo it. It was really after the bye week where we were like, we have to change. And they did, and it helped out a lot. So I disagree with that. I disagree that it was just 50-50 balls and Ryan Fitzpatrick being Fitzmagic. There was some of that, but there was also a lot of the other stuff too. So I disagree with that a little bit. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. Corporate Gamer asks, thoughts on my first round mock draft. 5th overall, this is Corporate Gamer's mock draft. He takes Tua Tagovailoa. 18th overall, he takes Curtis Weaver. And 26th overall, he takes Jonathan Taylor. I think it's very interesting. Now, in a no-trade scenario, and what do I think about this first round? I love the Tua pick. The Jonathan Taylor pick, I completely adore. Even though I like T. Higgins a little bit better, and I like in that spot, and I like if J.K. Dobbs is still there, I think those two are better. But I like Jonathan Taylor a lot too. Reminds me a lot of Mark Ingram. Curtis Weaver, I don't know enough about. And again, once we start breaking down the draft, well, I'll be a little bit more informed about some of these other players because I just don't know enough about them to make an opinion on them. So I don't know enough about Curtis Weaver. But Tua Tagovailoa and Jonathan Taylor, I like a lot. Obviously, I've talked about both of them a lot, and I think they're both very good players. So I'm not mad at that. Investing in the D-line, getting a running back, which there's not one on the roster right now, I like. But I do want to, I think when the Dolphins, they get to this 18th overall pick, there's so many really good defensive linemen in this draft. The guy from Iowa that I keep forgetting his name, his first name is AJ, I think. I can't remember if that's true or not, but I know a lot of people have him going in the top 10. I like him a lot. I think he's a perfect fit for this defense. If the Dolphins get to that spot where they're like, hey, man, we could go get this guy, I think they need to trade up to get him. He's a very good player. I like him a lot. He fits the scheme, perfectly. And in Iowa, defensive linemen are always good. So I think if you hit that 18th spot and you're like, oh, man, we can go get this high-level pass rusher and who's also just a great versatile defensive lineman, especially the guy from Iowa, I think I would have to trade up to get him because he is such a good player. So let's move on to Corporate Gamer. Corporate Gamer asks, I see that slot cornerback Mike Hilton will likely be a free agent. Should we sign him and try him at free safety? He could be like Marcus Joyner. No. Mike Hilton, the best thing Mike Hilton's ever done is some of those slot blitzes that the Pittsburgh Steelers run all the time. I think he had 3 sacks in a game, and that was his career highlight. Mike Hilton is not good enough to do anything else, really. He was a part of those bad secondaries in Pittsburgh. He was one of the issues of those bad secondaries in Pittsburgh. When Sean Davis wasn't consistent, and Mike Hilton wasn't consistent, and what was the other guy that was he was a Steelers corner for a long time. Artie Burns was on those struggling Steelers secondaries, and there was some other guy that I think he wore 22. I can't remember his name right now. The point is he was a part of that mess, and he was a problem in that mess. Now, he had a good season because he had way better players around him, but I don't like Mike Hilton enough to invest in him and give him that high of a plus I don't think he's a good enough, physical enough player to play free safety. So no, I'm going to go with a no on that one. This next question comes from Jagpack. Jagpack asks, if Thaddeus Moss declares for the draft, do you take him? Do you think he's first-round talent? Him paired with Gesicki would be interesting. I do like the idea of getting another tight end, like we just talked about through free agency. Hunter Henry and Tyler Eifert would be welcomed additions, even though I don't think the Dolphins should actively pursue tight ends in free agency. But when you think about Thaddeus Moss and some of the things that he can do, he's a bigger tight end. He's a good run blocker. He played in a pro-style offense in LSU. I don't think he's a first-round talent because I just don't think he did enough or showed enough for me to be like, yeah, that guy could be something. And your first-rounders, you either want them to be a long-time NFL starters or You want him to be a Pro Bowler. I don't necessarily think I'm sold on either one of those things for Thaddeus Moss. So no, I think he's more of a second to third, even maybe a third to fourth round talent, in my opinion. But I have watched a lot of Thaddeus Moss because I've been watching a lot of Joe Burrow, and he does show up a lot. But I just don't think he doesn't have that. I don't think he does anything particularly great enough to be like you know what he does do great. He's got great hands, and he definitely can go up and get the ball. But other than that, I don't know. I just don't think he just didn't do enough for me. Like, yeah, he's someone I would take with a first round pick. All right, moving on from that. So yeah, I would say no to that with his status being a first round pick. Moving on from that, next question comes from Adam. He says, do you think Dolphins can win the division next year with Pat seemingly in decline? Excuse me, guys. Do I think they can win the division next year? Depending on how the offseason goes, yes. I think the coaching staff is good enough to elevate and be really one of the better coaching staffs in the league. So if they can get adequate talent, yeah. And they have the opportunity to be able to do that this offseason. If they just nail things, like if they revamp the defensive line, especially, if they do that, this team has a chance. If this defensive line can become average to a little bit above average, then this defense has got a chance to be one of the better units in the league. Because I like Nick Needham enough to be our second corner, and Xavier Howard is still a dominant player, obviously. So this secondary, and with Eric Rowe being as versatile as he's been, the free safety position, I don't think you need to do a ton with. I don't think he has to be some special player. He's just got to be adequate. So the defense can be really good. The offense, I think, can just still continue to be a good passing offense, especially with the Shane Gailey system. Hopefully, with his philosophy, I think fits what this offensive roster currently constructed does well. So I think those things can work out to be something pretty good. So yeah, if they nail the line of scrimmage, then yeah, they can compete for a lot this season. And I don't think, and again, I've heard people, that's a lot to ask. No, it's not. It's not a lot to ask for. We've literally seen teams reconstruct and do enough to a roster to where they can flip it on its head. And I feel like this, with all the resources this team has, they can do that. And especially with this coaching staff and how talented they are, yes, Brian Flores is still here. And I think the additions of Josh Boyer, who I think is just going to be just as good as Patrick Graham, and I think he can be better than that. And I don't like the Chad O'Shea firing at all, but hopefully Shane Gailey can come in here, and I think his scheme does fit the offense, so that benefits the team as well. So yeah, there's a shot there, dude. There is a shot that could happen, where the Dolphins are competing and could be a force in the AFC East. This next question comes from Chip. Chip asks, if you had a choice of Burrow, Tua, or Herbert, which one you would take? If they were all three available at 5, I'm taking Joe Burrow. After the national championship game, I'm like, well, he's special. He's a very so is Tua. Tua's very special too. If you watch Tua, every loss Tua's ever had, he's played well in my opinion. I don't think he's played bad in any of his games. The Georgia game, I think, is his worst game of his career when he had the ankle issue. And same thing with Joe Burrow. Joe just has something to him when you watch him. Like, he's special. He just makes things happen. Obviously, probably the best college season a quarterback has ever had. And not only that, but he was in a pro-style offense. Not only that, but he was in the hardest conference in college football in the SEC. And he beat every great team that there was. And I think he didn't even throw a pick against them, or maybe threw one interception. So he's special. His resume is better than almost anybody's ever. So he's a very special player. And I think the deciding factor for me between Tua and I don't think Justin Herbert is even close to those two, by the way. He's not even close to those two. Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. He's not even in the same galaxy, in my opinion. The only thing that Joe and the Joe and Tua argument, if I was in a draft room, that I would seriously consider, and especially in this situation I would consider, because if Joe wasn't a thing, I would not consider this, is the injury thing. The injury thing, when it comes down to those two, is the deciding factor, in my opinion, because I think they're so great, both of them. And Joe's just a little bit bigger than Tua. He's 6'4", and he's a very physical player. I think that would be the deciding factor, is his size and his durability, in my opinion. Not because of anything, I'm talking about size related to durability, not to anything else. I think, and this is going to be controversial, but I think Tua is more of an accurate passer than Joe is. But maybe they're equal because they're both so deadly accurate. It's insane. So maybe I won't say that, but I think they're both insanely accurate quarterbacks. So they both have everything you would want. I mean, they get rid of the ball quick. They have the ability to extend plays. You know, they have a flick of the wrist type of a release. I mean, they both are so good in my opinion. So yeah, I think the deciding factor would be that. So to answer your question, Chip, I would pick Burrow if they were all three available. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan says, "Hey Skaggs, in your mind, are there certain positions that are better to focus on in free agency as opposed to the draft?" No. I think the Dolphins should invest both in the draft and free agency in both lines, because if you look at the offense, what's the biggest weakness on the offense? The offensive line. Second is running back. If you look at the defense, what's the biggest weakness? It's not even close. Defensive line. The secondary is good enough. You have Eric Rowe, who proved to be a very good, versatile safety in this defense. You have a great linebacker core, and maybe great's not the word. Well, you know what? I'm going to say great. I think they have the ability to be very good. All three of them are young. I like Sam McGuavin, even though he wasn't Patrick Willis. I still think he played well enough, especially at the tail end of last season, to come back another year and start. All three, Raekwon McMillan, Jerome Baker, all three of them are good players. The defensive line is just terrible. It's awful. And that needs to be fixed. So if you look at both weaknesses on this team, it's the line of scrimmage. They need to fix the line of scrimmage. So yes, all investments need to go. There's more than one position on each. So they need to invest in both of the lines of scrimmage, in my opinion. To answer your question, Ethan. This next question comes from Troy. Troy asks, "Have you watched videos on this year's quarterback draft class? Bro is magic on everything. Absolutely take him if he's there. Tua only throws one pass into coverage because his receivers are so wide open that we can't judge him for the NFL, and he is a higher impact runner. Untested pass game and injuries are not good. Herbert throws 25% of his passes into coverage and will be picked off in the NFL. Herbert is not graceful when he runs, and he doesn't have Roethlisberger size. NFL bust, in my opinion. Jordan Love throws a perfect ball and runs like the new NFL quarterbacks. He didn't have great receivers, so he had to throw into coverage often, but he puts the ball where only his receivers can get it and can throw it up to his only big receiver. He's the best fit for Miami's offense, IMO. I think Miami should take Love in the draft because he's the best. He's the second best quarterback available. What do you think?" No, I disagree with that. I disagree with that so much. Jordan Love, and I think I've seen enough of Jordan Love. He has a ceiling. He's a very high ceiling. Has he proved that there's a lot of substance to that in his college career? No. He's had wow moments. Have they come consistently? No. Is that because it's like a Daniel Jones situation like at Duke, that he's on a bad team? Yeah, it could be. But it also could be the other way around, where he goes to the NFL and he's just not consistent. I don't think he's shown that enough in college for me to be like, this guy is the future of this franchise. When you look at Joe Burrow and when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, they do things so special. Look at their stats. Now, I'm not a huge Pro Football Focus guy at all, but if you look at just normal stats, if you look at their completion percentages, and if you look at their passing grades and some of their numbers, Tua, I think, ranks top 5 NFL quarterback rating ever. Now, I know that's college football, but he did that in the SEC, okay? He was playing the best teams in the league. He went to 2 national championships. He did that in the highest competition you possibly can do that. Same thing with Joe Burrow. One of the best college seasons of all time. Not only that, if you just use your eye test on both of them, and I know you disagree, Troy, and that's totally fine. I could be totally wrong about this easily, and you could be right. Jordan Love could be the next Jim Kelly or something like that. He could be a great quarterback, but because no one's right on these. No one's definitively right. It's very subjective. But I think those two, in my opinion, are leaps and bounds above everyone else. I don't think anyone even comes close to them. I think those two are the cream of the crop, and I think there's a big drop-off after that. If Trevor Lawrence was in this draft, then I would say things differently. I think those would be the top 3. But if you're at 5 and one of them is still available, there's no way you can pass on one of them. in my opinion. So, in my opinion, if I had to rank them, I think, you take Joe Burrow over Tua because of the injury history and because of, Joe's 6'4", you've seen him take hits, he's durable. With Tua, there is that issue of injury. Now, people bring up, well, then why the heck would you draft him if he has this injury history? Deshaun Watson has 3 ACL tears in his career, okay? He goes to the NFL, seems to be doing just fine. Drew Brees had the shoulder issue in San Diego. They dumped him to the curb. Drew Brees did just fine after that. Tom Brady had an ACL tear in 2008. And after that, he seems to be doing just fine. So I don't think it's that big of a problem that Tua has had these issues. I know he's had the 2 ankle issues. I know he's had the hip issue. But other players have come back from worse than that. And I think Tua can do that. And, people were like, oh, Tua's not even going to walk in, 2 months or whatever. The dude was literally walking around. Remember his press conference? It surprised me when I watched it, when he declared for the draft. He just walked up to the podium. I was like, I know it's a bad injury, don't get me wrong, but I thought, people made it sound like it was way worse than it actually was. So, for those reasons, I think Tua and Joe Burrow are the best in their class, to answer your question, Troy. And, Jordan Love, I just feel like he's too much of a wild card. You don't know. There's a lot of I don't know. And I know that you attribute some of his issues, because he had a good amount of turnovers in college. It's the Josh Allen, it's the Daniel Jones effect. The people around, even though Josh Allen is still not a good passer in the league, and Daniel Jones is a better passer than Josh Allen, but they didn't have the big numbers because of the people that are around them. And that's true. That could be the same thing for Jordan Love, and same thing with Drew Lock. And we don't know if Drew Lock's going to turn into anything, but he had some of the same issues. So you could be absolutely right. I'm not saying, and I don't want to come off as like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong, because I'm not right. I could be totally wrong. But for those reasons, I, in my opinion, I'm taking Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. This question comes from SM. SM asks Skaggs, talk about the AFC Championship game, also known as the Miami Dolphins reunion game. Tennessee with Cameron Wake, Ryan Tannehill, KC with Damian Williams, Matt Moore, and Chad Henne. I don't even know why do people bring that up. First of all, Matt Moore is a backup. Chad Henne's on the practice squad. Cameron Wake is hurt. It has been the entire season. And I guess Ryan Tannehill, who only had 300 passing yards in all of the playoff games, I don't know. I don't know what else you guys want me to say about that. It is. I don't think people are like, oh, look at all the Dolphins in the playoffs. Yeah, I don't really care. We saw what they did here, and for whatever reason, whether it was, and we know it was the organizational issues, but it just didn't work here. So it's not skin off my dang back, that's for sure. I'm glad that they, they had success in other places. They didn't have that success here. It doesn't bother me. This next question comes from Josh. Josh asks, what 3 positions are the most important to address this offseason other than quarterback? The positions, defensive end, other defensive end, left end and right end, defensive tackle, and then I would say left tackle and or right tackle, depending on how you take. Those would be the positions that I would look into the most. This next question comes from Richard. Richard asks, what about signing running back Jordan Howard as a free agent? Chan Gailey did good things with running back Lamar Smith in the early 2000s. Well, the reason we could do that and hold the possessions for so long is because our defense was so dominant. I mean, they had 2 Hall of Famers on that defense, and so they could do stuff like that. And I don't think this team is gonna get to the point where Lamar Smith level, where it's like this dude can have 200 yards in a game. I just don't think that's how the offense is gonna be ran. So Jordan Love, does he fit the scheme? Not really. He doesn't do enough in the passing game. To answer your question, Richard. This next question comes from Corporate Gamer. He says, should we pay for both Sharif or Sheriff? You're talking about the guard from the Redskins. And Yannick Ngakoue in free agency. Yannick, no, he doesn't fit the scheme. He's not good against the run. He can't set the edge. He's a great pass rusher, but that's about it. Sheriff, yes, he's a great player. He's a great pass protector, run blocker. Has had a lot of injuries, though. So that could be something that could sway you from that. I think that's it, dude. We ran out of time. I apologize, guys. I'm sorry that I've been sneezing and snot and coughing throughout the episode. Hopefully that didn't deter you away from this episode. I obviously have a lot of fun answering questions. I couldn't get to them all. I'll save some of those for next week, like I usually do, and and that's gonna be it, guys, for this week's episode. A lot, interesting discussions. This offseason is gonna be rad. It's gonna be awesome, and yeah, I can't wait to see what all the new players that will be in Dolphins uniforms, because there's gonna be a lot of them, and it's gonna be exciting. So I'm Skax283, and I'll see you guys next week in the next episode too.